Hello, everybody, and welcome into Commodity Culture, where we break down commodities, markets, sound money principles, and geopolitics, all with the goal of making you a better investor in the commodities sector. My name is Jesse Day. Today is December 10th, 2025, and on this episode, I'm thrilled to welcome Lynette Zang to the program, an economist, precious metals and currency analyst, and the CEO of Zang Enterprises. As silver soars past $60, Lynette is reiterating her call for four-digit silver, which she believes represents its true value as the paper manipulation of the silver market starts to collapse. Lynette thinks the banking cartel tamping down prices is losing their grip, and we are experiencing a historic short squeeze that could send prices to the moon. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to introduce you to the new Commodity Culture merch Stack Silver Not Fiat t-shirt. I put a ton of time and effort into this design to create a shirt that silver stackers will love, to create something that I would want to wear as a devoted stacker, and got Commodity Culture logo on the back. Order today in the Commodity Culture shop. The link is in the description. Done with the promo. Let's move on to the interview. Lynette Zang, great to have you back on Commodity Culture. Of course, we have to kick the conversation off today with silver rocketing past $60 an ounce and now up approximately 100% year to date, greatly outperforming gold. Last time I had you on the show, you mentioned that you think a four-digit silver price is closer to reality. So I wonder your thoughts at the moment. Do you still think silver is tremendously undervalued? If you think it's going to four digits, obviously that's the case, but I want you to talk about that and give us your overall thoughts on recent price action in the silver market.
Well, it always works like this. When something is suppressed for a really long time and then you let the brakes off, then it shoots in a direction. So technically, silver's been suppressed for many, 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 many years. But it really was the start last year. And I think we talked about this, where in the US, where it's primarily a paper market, and the paper market has been leading the globe in pricing. But it started to shift last January into a physical market when the US imported a whole bunch of physical silver and a whole bunch of physical gold. And then we had backwardation where the current prices for delivery were much higher than the future prices. Because why would that happen? Well, because people don't think they're going to be able to deliver in the future, because silver is a diminishing asset. It gets used up in manufacturing. And it seems like the transition it's not complete yet, not by any means. And I think that's when we're going to see the four-digit number for silver. But what's really happening is we're in a transition where number one, affordability matters again. And number two, supply and demand is ultimately going to matter again. And we're already in that transition. So, plus it's really a reflex of what's happening in the debt markets, in the crypto markets, in all of the markets, that are so severely inflated and overvalued. And all of a sudden, people are looking at gold and silver. But to your point, silver is outperforming gold at the moment, because that's been even more suppressed, more volatile with the price action. And yet it's got full demand in every single sector of the markets. And you take a look at what's happening in the crypto. Is this a crypto winter? Is this the test? I don't know. I'm kind of surprised with the Wall Street and the government and the banks really pushing hard into that arena, why that area is doing so poorly. But there's only one place of demand for cryptocurrencies. That's it, one place. So if that demand dries up, this is my physical representation of a Bitcoin, which is designed to look like a gold coin. So you think that they're just the same. But I think that that's what's happening, a lot of what's happening. is the system is simply broken. This is not something that just happened. But I would say that 2022 was a big year when they started shifting and having to push rates up. And we're looking at what's happening in the global bond market. So the response in the physical monetary system, sound money, which is gold as the primary currency and silver as the secondary currency, they're going into their day, and demand and supply is mattering again, as it should.
Well, I want to read you a tweet by Gary Savage, a precious metals analyst and somebody I've had on the show for a couple times. He said, "The suppression in the silver market has collapsed. The time to be timid and skeptical is past. The cartel no longer has any control over the silver price. In fact, they are stuck in a massive short squeeze that is costing them billions." Would you agree with that? And do you think paper manipulation is broken for the long term at this point? Or do you think this is a short-term pause and this banking cartel is going to eventually redouble its efforts or try again to tamp down the prices?
No, I have to say I agree with that quote, and it is a short squeeze. And it started last January to become more visible into this transition. So I can't find fault with anything that he said. In fact, I agree with everything that he said. And I hope so, because it's about darn time. Having said that, they need a large crisis to complete the transition into the new monetary system. And it doesn't happen just like that. And it doesn't happen easily. And it doesn't happen without a lot of pain. So yes, I do think that the ability to suppress the price of silver and gold, both, is broken. And I hope that's permanent. And it very well could be, because of where we are inside of this currency life cycle system.
I want to talk about India for a moment, because in November, the Reserve Bank of India announced a framework effective April 1st, 2026, that allows consumers to pledge physical silver for credit via banks, non-banking financial companies, and housing financial companies. This coincides with a massive silver import surge in October of this year of around 60 million ounces, up 300% year over year. It looks like India is really embracing silver as money at this point in time. What are your thoughts? And do you expect this trend to perhaps carry over to other countries as well?
I think it will carry over to other countries, but I also think that India has been very forward over the years in first their gold scheme and now their silver scheme. And part of that, I think, has to do with the pricing of gold. And silver is, even at these levels, certainly for many people, a whole lot more affordable. And so I think that the trend that they've been watching with their population also, because that is a tradition in India for people to wear their wealth. They've been through hyperinflation. They've been through currency denominations not all that long ago. What was that? 2018, I think, or 16, something like that, where they demonetized like 85% of their currency. And so this, to me, is an additional scheme to, number one, there's part of them that needs the public to be somewhat resilient. But whenever they're going to deposit it into the system and they're going to pay interest on it, it's because the government is attempting to gather it and make it easy to, I don't know, dare I say it, confiscate? You know, that is something that I've been looking at, quite a bit. And that is something, that is a phenomenon that is global, whether it's done in an overt way, okay, turn in your gold, you have no choice, or it's done in a covert way through these schemes. Either way.
Very interesting.
Oh, I'm telling you, either way, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. So if you deposit it in the bank, and they want to confiscate it, they're going to do it. Rather than what? Go door to door? They've been working on this, well, primarily with gold, now with silver, but they've been working on this for a very long time. I know a big paper that came out was back in 2019, trying to entice the population to deposit their gold, which is money, and they know it's money. And silver now, it's a function of price, I think, as well.
I'd like to turn to China because effective January 1st of next year, China is introducing a form of soft export controls on silver aimed to prioritize domestic industrial needs, according to China's Ministry of Commerce. With this move, it seems like China has said out loud what people like yourself have been shouting from the rooftops for years. There's not enough silver to meet demand. And with the US now declaring silver a critical mineral, are we seeing a global awakening that you think will push true price discovery forward?
That is exactly the point. But the only way you're ever really going to have true price discovery if it really is on a true supply and demand market. And so, yes, that is part of this transition. And I don't know that governments are really keen on the public having the ability to maintain their wealth, but the public is just about the right size to help the government accumulate that wealth if it is held in an easy place for them to take. And what they'll do is they'll come out and they might make you, if they'll either do it overtly or they might even do it a little covertly by getting the public to think that this is what they would say, one-off thing, right? So in other words, it's only going to happen once and then you don't have to worry about it. So therefore you don't have to change your habit. But, India has not been really good at enticing their population into these schemes. I mean, some people have gone along, but yeah, I think silver is a critical mineral. It's used, and so is gold, but silver is used, well, they're both used in every single sector of the global economy, but silver more. And it gets used up in manufacturing. So, yep, I mean, there's only in physical form of anything. I don't care whether you're talking about lumber or oil or gold or silver or anything. In physical form, there is a finite amount. Even if they find another hoard that they didn't know about, there's still a finite amount. Unlike all of the contracts that have been driving all of this price action. So yeah, I mean, that's the most exciting thing for me is the banks losing control over manipulation of the sound money market, both gold and silver. It shouldn't be that way. They shouldn't have control. This is God's money. This is sound money that bankers and central bankers and governments cannot inflate away. Either one of them. And yes, I'm very happy to see the price action on silver. And gold just broke out of a triangle, I think yesterday. So a wedge. So I expect to see some really nice price action there. But yeah, technically silver has been breaking first like a double cup formation like I've never seen in any other asset. And it broke out of that. That's an awful lot of suppression. I mean, you're going back probably 100 years or so for that level of suppression. So it's not a surprise to me. And we've been talking about it. I think silver, gold, physical is now rearing its head again and taking control of these markets. And I love that. It's about darn time.
The sponsor of today's episode is ARC Silver Gold Osmium. Owner Ian Everard is praised even by his competitors as one of the most honest and level-headed bullion dealers in the United States. They have some great prices. You can see some of them displayed right now on screen. Take advantage of these specials today by reaching out to Ian at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com. Make sure to tell him, of course, that Commodity Culture sent you. And now, back to the interview. Well, keeping on that trend of you don't hold it, you don't own it, what are your thoughts on vaulting precious metals and silver and gold-backed tokens? This is another discussion that's come up a lot because people say, well, you can't carry around fractions of gold in your pocket to buy groceries, and silver, now that it's getting more and more expensive, you can't really do that with silver perhaps in the near future either. So the answer for some people is you do a blockchain, a token on the blockchain that's backed by physical silver or gold stored somewhere in a vault, and these are stored in so-called safe jurisdictions. The Royal Canadian Mint in Canada, which I think is a questionable place, a questionable country to store your metals, in a country that froze people's bank accounts because they didn't follow the political directives of the
And
government.
also has no gold.
Yes, exactly. That's a very good point. Singapore and Switzerland, which used to be neutral. Switzerland's thing used to be we're neutral in every conflict. We don't get involved. Now they're very pro-Ukraine. They're getting involved there. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but they've broken their neutrality. And so that can be somewhat of a concern to store metals in that jurisdiction, for example. What are your thoughts there? Is there any scenario under which vaulting metals makes sense? I mean, I guess if you're storing millions and millions of dollars worth of metal, silver, for example, it's too big to store at home. But what are your thoughts there?
Well, I have a few thoughts on it. Number one, I would completely stay away from vaulting it in a bank. So if I were going to do vaulting, then it needs to be private. Some of it you need immediate access to, because you cannot skip over the turmoil that we haven't, we've begun to sort of enter this phase a little bit, but in the strategy that we execute at Zang Enterprises, it's a layered approach, right? So the very first part of it, which would include some cash, that's where you could also include some digital gold like Glint or what's the other one? Glint and Kinesis, right? One of those. And I only say those because they are redeemable. If I want my gold, there will be rules I have to follow. But if I want the gold that I have stored there, I can have it sent to me. Otherwise, I've got it on a credit card, like a MasterCard or something like that, and I can go to the grocery store and I can use it. So that is for the first really liquid part. And then, of course, you just have your raw metals of a variety of sizes. Those things I feel very, very strongly you need to have with you, because you're going to need them like that when it happens. Having said that, there's other parts of the strategy or other layers where you might consider accumulating gold to hold your purchasing power so that you can convert it into income producing assets. If you're executing a strategy like that, then a private vault with it segregated in your name that they can't access without your key, I do feel comfortable in a safe vault. You need to vet everything. I question whether or not the places that are currently considered a safe harbor, to your point, like Switzerland and Singapore, this is really a global issue. And while I cannot guarantee that governments will and central bankers will come together in a synchronized way again, we certainly saw them do that after 2008. And with forward guidance but just a globally synchronized methodology. And I'm not going to lie, I have some concerns about that, because desperate governments do desperate things. This isn't just something that's happening in the US. This is something that's happening all over the world. So it's almost like someplace like Serbia, where we were talking and they just rubber stamp everything. It goes in, it's hard to track everything. I would probably, honestly, if I could find, and I don't know of one yet, we've started doing our research on it. But if I could vet a really solid vault like we did in Panama, we found one in Panama that I would feel very comfortable with it, thanks to my friend Francis Hunt, right? That was a phenomenal experience. I would feel comfortable with something like that. But we're looking at another war, right? On top of what we already have going on, when you're seeing Germany and Europe really hasn't built their army, but now they're looking to do that, which means they're anticipating deeper conflict. And I can't even sit here and say to you absolutely that there are sides in this conflict, because so much of it is for visibility, right? We aren't going to know the truth of that until we know the truth of that. But I wouldn't guarantee that everybody's at the IMF except for a few countries, and they meet all the time and they talk quite regularly. And we already saw them be synchronized until they weren't anymore. So, I feel good about a really well vetted private vault. That I do. But I also feel like there is absolutely that first part of your portfolio that you can't put in a vault because you need it when you need it, just like that.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to the reason for war that you were mentioning, I'm on the same page. I don't believe anything that's being told to anybody by the media or the government about the reasons for the conflicts and everything going on. And you got to remember that governments and the high level politicians are generally totally fine with killing and death and anything that will advance their own agenda, consolidate their power and wealth. They could really care less. A lot of these people are psychopaths. That type of position naturally attracts psychopathic people because you kind of have to be that type of person to rise through the ranks in such a system. Let's not get distracted, though. I want to talk about the FOMC meeting today for a moment. To no one's surprise, the Fed cuts rates by 25 basis points. Trump is now planning to install a new Fed chair. He seems very adamant on cutting rates further. It looks like he's going to install somebody that's going to completely erase the illusion, and I believe it was an illusion, of the Fed being independent and not political. I think they will now be fully political, and it will be out in the open. How do you expect that to impact financial markets and the gold and silver price? Because a lot of people are saying, the more they cut rates, the more that provides fuel for precious metals.
I definitely do think that everything that you laid out there will come to pass. There's a lot of things that are very obvious in the Trump administration that even though people knew it, it was more hidden. So to have an independent, the Fed has never been independent, actually. When it was created, it wasn't independent. And I actually think somewhere, if you want it, I'll send it to you. But I think I even did a spreadsheet on how not independent it is. But now you're right. It's just going to be a whole lot more obvious. And by cutting the rates, what are they really saying when they cut rates? They're saying that the dollar, it doesn't matter where you are, but the dollar is overvalued and they're taking away even more, whatever little bit of purchasing power yet remains. And so what does that bring us into? That brings us into hyperinflation. And what happens in hyperinflation, right? All confidence is lost. Once we go back into this inflationary phase that is really noticeable by the people that cannot afford to feed their families already, I think all of this is leading to revolution. I really do, because there's only so far that you can push people. And when you push them past that point and they can't feed their children, then we have a revolution. And I'm happy about that because we need a revolution. We need to say, no, you cannot abuse us anymore. We need sound money back in the system. We need to take our power back. And, it's been kind of interesting because in this country, we are seeing a rise in socialism. And the platform that they're standing on is rent control. And it was born out of Occupy Wall Street from 2008. And so I keep saying, I've got to get in front of these socialists because they don't know what they're fighting for. It's not rent control. It's money control. And how do you get money control? Well, you give yourself the tool that if you don't like what they're doing, you can demand to have that money redeemed. Right? You pull the gold out of the system. That gives the public the power because it forces governments to have fiscal responsibility. What a concept. You asked me about tokenized gold. You cannot convert unless they change it, and they could certainly change the rules. And if they do, I'll change my mind on this. but in any level of tokenization in anything, whether it's gold or glasses or whatever they're going to tokenize, from my reading so far, you cannot convert those tokens into the underlying asset. I have a big problem with that because there's no way for you, the public, the individual, to hold anybody's toes to the fire. Yeah, it's there. Oh, okay, we'll have our friends audit it. See, it's there. I don't trust that it's there unless I can say, give it back to me, right? That's what's going to hold their toes to the fire and make a difference and give the public back its control. What a concept. This is our opportunity to do that. And if we blow this opportunity, I could just say, I'm glad I'm old. But it's not the kind of world that I want to leave to our future children or the children, my grandkids. They're in their teens right now. What's this world going to look like for them? That's not okay with me. So, the tokenization, and I'll tell you something else about the tokenization. And that is, if you look at the banking structure, they get to rehypothecate or use your equity, whatever you've got in there, as their collateral to borrow against. But if you look at the level of leverage, so this little bit of debt, of equity, your deposits, what have you, with many, many layers of debt on top of it, well, the banks are kind of constrained. There's only so much leverage that they can put on there. And it's worse now than it was in 2008 when it was a 30-to-1 leverage that took down Lehman. So they need more equity so they can expand their leverage and their ability to trade, because everything's been turned into a big fat trade. That's what really makes me happy about gold and silver. Now the physical starting to take over and price discovery. So yeah, I'm not keen on tokenization unless they put in a mechanism where you could convert to the underlying. Then I can see how you can really use it and actually even have some level of trust in it. But if it's intangible, I'm sorry. I don't trust it, because you can look at all the legal systems that you want and who owns everything. If you think you own anything, that is just your perception. And I can't speak for every place in the world, but my bet would be that it's pretty much set up like this. Here in the US, it's DTC that owns everything. They are the legal registered owner of all of the stocks and all of the bonds and all of the Wall Street products. You are the beneficial owner. It's the same thing with your retirement accounts, with everything. You don't own anything. You are just the beneficial owner. And as long as it suits them for you to think that you had some level of ownership, great. But when push comes to shove and it no longer benefits them when there is a big crisis, like we saw in 2008, or even really like we saw in 2020, when push comes to shove, you find out who is too big to fail, who is just about the right size. And what do you do? Because all of this technology creates more and more distance. Right? And the more that if you're having that distance, that means that you're not having conversation, and it's divide and conquer. This is not a big surprise. That's why when you see people are so divided, right? And it's almost cult-like. If you don't think exactly the way I think, then I hate your guts and I have the right to kill you, take everything and hurt you, right? That's not, I feel so strongly in building community. It's one of the things that when you and I have these conversations and I say, I've got to come and see that, it's because community comes together and all voices get heard. Because whether you agree or you disagree, I'm telling you, there's always a grain of truth. even if somebody has the worst intention against you, somewhere in there, there is likely some level of grain of truth. And we've lost, so many people have lost the ability to trust their gut. Does this feel right? No, because there's so much discord that's constantly being thrown at you that you don't know what to think. And so then you freeze. Well, that's the plan. But it doesn't benefit you to freeze. It benefits you to come together in community, have this conversation. What feels right to you? What is your gut telling you? Regardless of what anybody else is blah, blah, blah saying, even me. It's why in all my work, I give you the links. Here, read it. If you draw different conclusions than I've drawn, I will support your right to the death, right? We have to do that. And by the way, this discord was all by plan too. You know, I mean, that's what people have to understand. We've been taught to think short term, short term, short term. Oh, that happened 12 seconds ago. That's old news. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it matters. These things don't happen in a minute. They happen over a very long period of time so that you don't realize what's happening. It's the frog in the pot of water.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm completely in agreement that it's all by design. For some reason, people like to throw around that quote, never attribute to malice what can be boiled down to ignorance or something like that. I think it's the opposite. Actually, when the politicians appear ignorant in what they're doing, they're actually malicious. And this is something that they know very well what they're doing. And they're doing it for the exact reasons that you've laid out, to control the population more efficiently, to sow chaos and discord. I mean, if you have to choose between paying for groceries and rent, you don't really have much time to pay attention to what the government's doing, or, you know, what sound money even is. They're trying to push people, and they have successfully done so, into that area of ignorance, because when you're struggling to make ends meet, when you're worried about potential violent crime or war breaking out or any of these things, you have zero time to focus on what's actually going on behind the scenes. And I think that's the major problem that a lot of societies are facing today. Would you agree with that?
Not only do I agree with that, but, and I'll have to pull it out when I go in and do this, but in the beginning, when they were planning on the Federal Reserve and what that whole system would look like, they actually said that by putting inflation in the system, because not one man in a million, after all, understands inflation, if people have to work harder to maintain their standard of living, they will have less time to pay attention to what we're doing. So, you know, we can talk about the Constitution and how it's been abused, but the reality is that started in 1913 when they legalized the Fed, and then got us to work for, oh, what is this? A Federal Reserve note? Well, the Fed is a private corporation. So we are forced to work for corporate debt. I don't know why that's okay with anybody.
Absolutely. Now, I want to end on the geopolitical bifurcation that is happening right now, the whole BRICS versus the West narrative, and get your thoughts on whether you think those countries and the East is better insulated against this type of potential hyperinflation in fiat currencies. I know China has now created this CHIPS system, CIPS. It's a yuan-based global payment system. They're using it to circumvent SWIFT. Supposedly, they're connecting it to many different countries, and there'll be many participants. Gold could potentially be involved here. Is this a solution? Obviously, China has its own set of problems as well. People often talk about, it's funny, you either hear two things about China. One is they're about to collapse any day now, and the other is they're going to dominate the world and be the next global superpower. So I wonder what your thoughts are on that East versus West narrative, and whether you think the East is more insulated from a lot of the things we've been talking about, or are we all in this together?
I believe very strongly that we are all in this together. And I also know that what gold does is it forces fiscal responsibility. So much as people want to say, well, the BRICS are coming out with this gold-backed currency and the unit and blah, 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 which is not formalized. But again, it's also not really convertible. It's not redeemable, I should say. So I don't think there are any exceptions to this rule. And the problem with the gold for them putting it in now, let's say, whether it's China or all the BRICS nations or what have you, is that as soon as they would do that, it would fix the unpayable debt where it is. And in that regard, China is no different than we are. I think the main difference is that they have a lot of gold to rely on, including since 2006 when they made it legal for the public, for the population to buy gold again. But most of that, going back to what we were talking about with India, is held inside of the banking system, making it quite easy. The other thing that I'll point out, because to your point, a lot of people will say, oh, well, look at the unit and the new currency of the BRICS, and this is going to be so great for the, but I gotta say, if you look at Russia, China, India, Brazil, South Africa, are these countries that are typically quite supportive of a free economy and a supported public? My answer would be, so why would they magically start now?
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting because when people realize what's going on in the West, they often turn to the East as some sort of example of how things should be done. But I mean, we got to understand how things actually operate in countries like China and Russia. Talk to actual Russian people. There's many here in Serbia that have fled after the war. Why? They don't want to get drafted. One person I talked to had difficulty selling his home because they were going to draft him if he tried to sell his home. He had to flee the country. It just a bunch of crazy stuff. And it's a surveillance state there as well. I mean, I've spoken to many Russians about this. Now you could say, well, those are the people who fled, so they're more on the Ukraine side. Whatever. Just look at the reality of the situation. But before you start praising Putin as some sort of benevolent, he's an Orthodox Christian who cares for his people. No, he's not. He's an ex-KGB agent. He's an evil man, just like all politicians at these levels are. So don't get distracted by that. It's kind of like looking for the least evil person. And in that sense, I think from a geopolitical strategic point of view, Putin is making a lot of the right moves. He does appear to care about Russia, but he cares mostly about his own position and his own power, just like every politician at that level. He's just a little more bright than maybe some of the European leadership. But that's neither here nor there. Lynette, tell us about Zang Enterprises as well as your YouTube channel.
Well, I'm super active on YouTube and Twitter at the Lynette Zang, and Instagram and Facebook at Lynette Zang. And at Zang Enterprises, we execute a sound money strategy. And sound money is simple: physical gold and silver that governments and central banks cannot inflate away. And it's simply because it's used in every single sector of the global economy. So it goes back to supply and demand. And the fact that gold is the only financial asset that runs zero counterparty risk, according to the Bank for International Settlements. So we take a very layered approach based on history, and it's broken into shorter term, like emergency, boom, boom, boom. Intermediate term, which is more protection, and then also being in a position to take advantage of opportunities that come up. So we absolutely have part of the strategy as an exit strategy as well, even though every portfolio should always have a foundation of sound money to support it. You know, depending upon what's going on and where we are in the system would determine the kind of gold and silver that you hold and the level of gold and silver that you hold. To long-term legacy and its dynastic wealth that has lasted in families at least 300 years. So I love our number, 833-GLDZANG, which is a great number. But we are here to be of service, and we are working really hard to support local communities, because with what we're dealing with, and I think it's easier for you where you are in Serbia than it is here for me in Phoenix, but we work on this hard all over the world. Make sure that you have a very strong local community around you to create surety in food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, that community piece is arguably the most important piece, as well as shelter. And the community comes together. They bring the skills that they have, they bring the assets that they have, and they work together to survive this. And I think that's beyond critically important. And then even bigger than that, we've got to come together in global community, because I do believe it was 3% of the population in the US that created or pushed the Revolutionary War. We need another revolution because we got to take our power back. This is our opportunity. So if we could get 3%, just 3% of the global population to convert their garbage, this stuff, into this, then I believe that we have a shot at having a seat at the table, because it's 1% that is ruling the 99%. So if we're 3%, we are that much stronger than them. And I believe we can demand that. And I think we have to for everybody's benefit. Me, I'm old. I don't care. But I want to leave this world a better place than when I found it. And I want to make sure that our children have a level playing field. And that's something that is definitely younger generations are waking up to the lie and realizing it's been a lie. So that's what we do. We support sound money and community globally.
Well, I love the mission. I'm going to put all of those links and information in the description below. I definitely urge people to follow you on all those platforms, as well as check out Zang Enterprises. And of course, great videos on YouTube. Thank you so much, Lynette, and looking forward to the next time we can chat.
I always look forward to it, Jesse. I will say you are one of my most favorite people. I love you.
That is so nice of you to say. Thank you so much, and talk soon.
Bye.
And thank you for joining us today. Our sponsor, ARC Silver Gold Osmium, has some great prices on gold and silver bullion products. The prices are on your screen right now. These are while supplies last and subject to change. So reach out to owner Ian Everard today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com, and make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you. And of course, pick up your Stack Silver Not Fiat t-shirt, available exclusively in the Commodity Culture shop. The link is in the description below, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.